Do you always toss a product after its expiry date? We all know there are certain foods you can eat past their best before date without any problem, but there are some you'd best never put in your mouth beyond expiration, at the risk of getting sick. Here are 20 of them. Ground beef. Ground beef is an unpredictable meat in both its preservation and preparation. Of course, we all know it's crucial to cook it well to avoid getting sick. Yet, few people know you must very closely monitor its expiry date. Expired ground beef is more likely to be contaminated by Staphylococcus aureus or Salmonella. The result, you could get food poisoning. Or worse, ground pork. You should take the same precautions with ground pork. If you don't, and you eat expired meat, you are increasing the chances of contracting various diseases, such as food poisoning. Some people who have fragile immune systems even risk losing their life. Fish, just like with ground beef, never play Russian roulette with fish. Once you've reached the expiry date, you'll need to eat it or throw it away. Otherwise, you will be multiplying your chances of getting listeriosis, a disease that causes abdominal pain, diarrhea, nausea, and vomiting. This is particularly dangerous for pregnant women as it can cause miscarriage. Pre-made salads. The pre-made salads found at the grocery store are wonderful, as long as you consume them before their expiry date. Given that they may have been grown near contaminated water, they could be full of bacteria that will have had sufficient time to multiply. In any case, lettuce leaves quickly wilt and become unappetizing. Shrimp, like most seafood, shrimp are fragile, even when you respect the expiry date. If they were poorly stored or handled, they could have been contaminated by bacteria when fished. To reduce the risk of contamination, always abide by the expiry date. Raspberries are highly perishable. It is recommended that they be eaten shortly after being purchased. Otherwise, they will deteriorate and transform into a sort of unappetizing puree, which is an opportune environment for the multiplication of Cyclospora cayetanensis, bacteria that causes cyclosporiasis, a disease that has several symptoms similar to those of food poisoning. Soft cheese. With most hard cheeses, you can cut off the mold and eat the rest. However, with soft cheeses, like feta or brie, it's not a good idea to do so. This type of cheese is more susceptible to Listeria monocytogenes, the bacteria that causes listeriosis. Milk pasteurization eliminates most bacteria present in milk. However, there is nothing to guarantee that the milk wasn't contaminated thereafter. For example, it may have been poorly stored at the grocery store, which may have allowed certain bacteria to multiply. Drinking sour milk increases your risk of suffering from food poisoning. The symptoms are many: stomach cramps, nausea, fever, and diarrhea. If you still feel like pouring yourself a glass of expired milk, check the texture and taste. Homemade whipped cream. If you're making homemade whipped cream, it's important to eat it quickly. Not because it will make you sick, but because it will lose its texture. By the next day, it will already have become quite liquid. Chicken must be well cooked and properly stored to avoid any health problems. Chicken eaten after its expiry date could be contaminated by E. coli, bacteria that cause many diseases like gastroenteritis, meningitis, and urinary infections. Plus, you can't trust its appearance when it comes to deciding whether the chicken is still good or not. It's best to go by the date written on the packaging. Fiddleheads available. During the spring, fiddleheads are a true delight. However, you have to take certain precautions to avoid getting sick. A rolled-out fiddlehead, in fact, becomes inedible since it produces a toxic substance. After its purchase, You have 2 days to eat this vegetable, and a few extra days if you place it in a bowl full of water. Spinach leaves tend to spoil quickly, especially if they are wet. They then become wilted and unappetizing, so much so that it's practically impossible to eat them beyond their expiry date. To prolong their lifespan, dry them properly and rinse them before use only. Cooked meats, according to popular belief, cooked meats are good for months. Yet, it's important to go by their best before date, unless you want to get listeriosis. Several of this disease's symptoms are similar to those of food poisoning. Plus, in some people like children or the elderly, it can lead to meningitis. Clams cannot be stored for long. A shelled clam lasts up to 3 days in the fridge, while without a shell, it will last for just 24 hours. After that, they will start to smell strongly and become inedible. Alfalfa is a food that should be eaten more often. This hardy plant is very good for your health when consumed quickly. When poorly stored, it will go bad in no time. And as you know, rot is not very good to eat. Bean sprouts are essential to Asian cuisine. Unfortunately, they go bad very quickly, especially when left in their sealed packaging. It is recommended that you store them in a brown paper bag in the refrigerator and wait 2 days at most before eating them. Oysters. You should always follow the expiry date when it comes to oysters. Firstly, because a spoiled oyster gives off a foul odor, and also since they could be contaminated with Vibrio vulnificus, bacteria leading notably to blood poisoning. Scallops must be consumed within 24 hours of being purchased. Beyond that, they can affect your health by causing food poisoning, among other things. To have them last longer, you can freeze them. Eggs, normally, you should never eat a rotten egg. There is, however, a simple trick to determine whether an egg is still fresh. Drop it into a bowl of water and watch what happens. If it floats, this means you need to throw it away. And if it sinks, you should be able to consume it no problem.